Kerridine has just gone 10 to 1 now, and scientists are looking into why people are still being diagnosed with a type of cancer linked with exposure to asbestos, despite it being banned here in 1999. Experts at Cancer Research UK and Glasgow University say it can take decades for someone to develop the condition mesothelioma after they've been exposed to asbestos. Well, let's speak to Professor Kevin Blyth from Glasgow University, who's leading the study. So thank you for joining us, Kevin. Is there still quite a lot then that is not known about mesothelioma?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Unfortunately, there is a fair amount that we don't know. It's a very serious illness, and so it can cause difficult symptoms and is difficult to treat. So the programme that you've mentioned is really focused on trying to learn more about the disease and really discover how we can treat it more effectively.
Is there any indication at this stage then as to why there's such a long period between exposure to asbestos and then it turning into mesothelioma, or is that something that you really need to find out?
Yeah, I mean it's a real puzzle. Obviously patients tend to be exposed to asbestos decades before they get mesothelioma, and for most of that time, there's going to be some inflammation in the chest, but certainly not cancer. And we know some features of the biology that are characteristic of patients in whom the cancer develops, but thankfully in most patients it doesn't turn into cancer. But the program, the Predict Meso program that we're kind of now running across the world, is really focused on trying to understand just exactly what are the triggers that just make that change in an individual that drives it towards cancer.
So the idea is that if you figure out what these triggers are, then you can you stop it turning into mesothelioma?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly the goal. So some patients, all patients go through a period of time where they've got some changes that are early enough for us to do something. We see a small proportion of those naturally that come through our clinics, and so we're trying to capture those patients who're coming with a pre-mesothelioma episode. At the moment, they're coming into the program. We're measuring things in their tissues and biopsies and fluids, and we're trying to use that information to help us design new therapies, and then we'll take those therapies back into patients and try and evaluate those to try and see if they can stop patients in the future either getting the cancer at all or it becoming a much more controllable cancer that is much more slow to progress.
And you said, so is that right? You said it's like 40 years sometimes to develop into mesothelioma from asbestos exposure.
Yeah, the average is somewhere between 30 to 50 years.
Right.
So usually so that's the real puzzle as to why it takes so long. I mean, the trigger probably happens in the last year or the last couple of years before you come in with symptoms, but we just need to understand that trigger more precisely.
Right. So are you talking about people then who shipyard workers and people like that, people who were perhaps exposed to asbestos in a much more industrial setting, perhaps in the late 70s and early 80s?
Yeah, I mean that's your classic patient, but there's a real range actually. Unfortunately, although we stopped importing asbestos in the late 90s and shipyard workers became less at risk, we didn't export that asbestos, so it's in thousands of our public buildings have got asbestos in them. Many of the older homes that many of the population live in will have asbestos somewhere. So we do see a mixture of people, from all walks of life. So, people just need to be conscious of disturbing, especially older buildings, for the risk that there might be asbestos lurking around.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. All the best with your bit of work there, Professor Kevin Blyth from Glasgow University.
Now, for the first time